Thursday. Just another day on the calendar, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. I woke up around 6 in the morning, the sky still gray with dawn, the house wrapped in that quiet pause before the city stirs to life. In the kitchen, the warm yellow light over the stove flickered on, and I fell into the same routine I'd followed every weekday for 8 years, making Tyler's breakfast. 2 eggs over easy, 3 strips of bacon crispy enough to shatter with a bite, whole wheat toast golden on the edges with the thinnest swipe of butter. I could do it blindfolded by now. My hands didn't need instructions. They moved out of habit as if I were a live-in chef instead of a wife. The ritual felt less like love these days and more like a job description I never officially signed. The smell of bacon filled the kitchen as I plated the food, but Tyler hardly noticed. He sat at the table, suit pants pressed tie draped around his neck, but his eyes were locked on his phone. His thumbs moved fast, tapping, pausing, typing again. And then came that small, crooked smile. That smile used to belong to me. Years ago, I'd catch it when I walked into a room or when I told some silly story after a 12-hour shift. Now I only saw it when Charlotte texted him. Charlotte Thomas, his so-called best friend from college. The one who always had a crisis, always on Thursdays, always right around his longest lunch break. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. I cracked an egg into the skillet a little harder than necessary. Another crisis, I asked, keeping my tone neutral, like I was asking about the weather. She's going through a lot, he said without looking up. Her ex is still stalking her. She just needs support. Support. That word had become his shield for everything. Strange, I thought, how her emergencies only ever happened on Thursday afternoons. Stranger still, how they never seemed serious enough to involve the police. But I bit my tongue. I'd learned that challenging Charlotte's role in his life was like questioning Scripture. He defended her with a faith I hadn't seen him use for anything else. Not for me, not for us, not even for his job. So instead, I reminded him, "Don't forget tonight the pharmacy conference. They're giving me the 5-year award." He tied his burgundy tie in the reflection of his phone screen, not the one I'd given him 2 Christmases ago, the one that had gathered dust until Charlotte complimented the color last week. Now it was his favorite. "I'll try to make it," he said, still not looking at me. Then came the inevitable add-on, "But if Charlotte needs me?" The sentence hung in the air like smoke. We both knew how it ended. I slid his plate in front of him and watched him scroll instead of eat. 8 years of mornings like this, and suddenly it hit me. When did I stop being his wife and start being background noise? When did my presence fade into the furniture while Charlotte's name lit up his face like Christmas lights? By the time I left for my shift at Riverside General, the knot in my stomach was tighter than the bandage roll I'd tucked into my bag. I should have been excited for tonight. I should have been rehearsing my thank you speech, thinking about the dinner, maybe picturing Tyler clapping proudly from the audience. But all I could think about was that smile, the one that used to be mine, now saved for Thursday text messages. And though I didn't know it yet, this Thursday wasn't just another Thursday. It was the day an accident, a phone screen, and 23 careless words would unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The rain had started just after my shift ended, a steady drizzle that grew heavier with every block I drove. My wipers screeched against the glass, old rubber dragging across water it could barely push aside. I made a mental note again that Tyler had promised to replace them weeks ago. Like so many promises, it never happened. Downtown lights glared through the downpour halos of yellow bleeding into the streaming windshield. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I merged onto Madison Avenue. 15 minutes in good weather. 30 in this storm. If Tyler had kept his word, I'd be meeting him at the Marriott Ballroom right now, standing beside coworkers smiling for photos as they handed me the 5-year service plaque. Instead, I was alone in the rain. I thought about calling him again. Just one more try. Maybe Charlotte's crisis had ended and he'd finally remembered his wife. My phone sat in the cup holder screen black waiting. I told myself not to, that his silence at breakfast had already answered the question. Still, my eyes kept darting to it like maybe this time he'd come through. The light at 5th and Madison turned green. I eased forward, careful in the slick conditions. That's when I saw it, movement to my left, too fast, too close. A lifted pickup barreled through the red light like the storm didn't exist. I didn't even have time to gasp. The sound came first, a metallic shriek, wet and violent, as the truck slammed into the driver's side of my car. The world twisted. My seatbelt yanked hard across my chest. Metal folded around me like paper. The steering wheel hit my shoulder at an angle that made geometry stop making sense. Pain ripped through me, white-hot and paralyzing. My head snapped against glass. For a split second, I noticed raindrops hanging suspended on the shattered windshield, perfect beads of light before everything blurred. Then stillness. I tried to move. My left arm dangled at a wrong angle, useless. My chest burned with every breath, shallow and ragged. Warmth streamed down my face, blinding one eye. Blood. My blood. And then absurdly, I remembered my mother's old warning. Always wear clean underwear. Hannah, you never know when you'll be in an accident. The thought should have been funny, but all I could do was choke on a laugh that turned into a sob. Voices broke through the ringing in my ears. Young panicked. I didn't see her. The light was yellow. I swear the kid from the truck, no older than 20, babbling excuses. Other voices followed, calmer, commanding. Don't move her. Call 911. Get a blanket. Red and blue lights flashed against the rain-slick pavement. The paramedics arrived, efficient and focused. A young EMT leaned into the crumpled frame, his voice steady but urgent. Ma'am, can you hear me? I nodded, or thought I did. Words spilled out, half professional reflex, half shock. Dislocated shoulder, possible concussion, lacerations to the scalp. He glanced at his partner, surprised. Are you in medicine pharmacy? Riverside General? I whispered before another stab of pain silenced me. All right, Hannah, he said, reading my name from my ID clipped to my scrubs. We've got you. Stay with me. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. They slid a cervical collar around my neck, secured an oxygen mask, then pushed an IV into my good arm, IV, pronounced clearly like a small mercy to my concussed brain. We'll control the pain, the EMT promised, but extraction's gonna hurt. Metal groaned as they cut the door away with hydraulic shears. Rain poured in, mixing with the warmth on my skin. Every shift of the wreck sent fire down my side. I focused on the EMT's face, on the rhythm of his words, anything to keep from drowning in pain. Finally, they lifted me free. The night air hit like ice. Sirens wailed. The stretcher wheels clattered against asphalt. And then another face leaned over me. Officer Janet Morrison. I recognized her instantly. She picked up her mother's prescriptions from my pharmacy every month. Always smiling, always asking about my life. Hannah, she said softly, rain dripping from her uniform cap. It's Janet. You're going to be okay. Who should we call for you? The automatic answer rose before I could think. Tyler Wilson, my husband. 8 years of instinct muscle memory of a marriage I was still trying to believe in. She dialed, straight to voicemail, tried again, and again, same result. Janet's eyes met mine, concern flickering there. Do you want us to try someone else? I hesitated, staring at the spiderweb cracks on my phone as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. I wanted to believe Tyler would pick up that Charlotte hadn't swallowed him whole, but the silence said otherwise. My chest tightened, not from the accident, but from something deeper, something breaking. The ambulance doors slammed shut, sealing me into fluorescent light and antiseptic air. The monitor beeped steadily beside me, proof that my body was still holding on. But my heart, my marriage. That was already in critical condition. The ER ceiling tiles looked like worn teeth, yellowed under fluorescent light. I counted them, anything to distract from the pain gnawing through my shoulder. The air smelled of antiseptic, sharp and sterile, but underneath it, I caught the copper tang of my own blood. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm, reminding me I was still alive, even if it didn't feel like it. Nurse Patricia adjusted the IV, pronounced perfectly, thank God, and checked my vitals. She'd been working emergency for 20 years, and her calm was the only anchor in the chaos around me. She leaned in, her voice low and kind. Honey, do Do you want me to call your husband again? We've tried 3 times straight to voicemail. I closed my eyes. The word husband felt heavier than the sling on my arm. 3 calls, 3 ignored chances. He hadn't even silenced his phone for work. He'd turned it off so nothing would interrupt his lunch with Charlotte. "Let me try," I whispered, reaching for my own phone. The screen was shattered from the crash spiderweb cracks, spreading across the glass, but it still lit up under my touch. My fingers trembled as I typed, though I couldn't tell if it was from the concussion or from fear of the answer I already knew. "Had an accident. I'm at Riverside General ER, dislocated shoulder concussion. Can you come get me?" The message delivered instantly. I held my breath. A few seconds later, the dots appeared, those 3 blinking dots that had once filled me with comfort. He's typing. He saw it. He'll come. The dots vanished, reappeared, vanished again. My chest rose and fell too fast, every inhale scraping against bruised ribs. Finally, his reply landed. "Can't leave lunch with Charlotte right now. Her ex is stalking her. Call an Uber." "Sorry, babe." 23 words. I read them once, twice, a third time, hoping I'd misread, hoping the concussion was scrambling letters into nonsense. But no, it was crystal clear. My husband of 8 years had just told me to get myself an Uber home from the emergency room because Charlotte needed him more. Something inside me cracked, not a bone, not muscle, but the structure that held our marriage together. 8 years of breakfasts, cooked bills, paid holidays, hosted, promises kept. 8 years of waiting for him to show up only to realize he never would. I stared at the message until the words blurred into blue and gray streaks. Patricia saw it in my face before I said anything. "What did he say?" she asked gently. I showed her the screen. She shook her head, lips pressing into a line. She'd seen this before too many times in too many variations. The emergency contact who wasn't interested in the emergency. "Honey," she said softly, "is there anyone else we can call? A brother? Maybe? A friend?" My throat tightened. For years, I'd carried Tyler like dead weight, convincing myself it was normal, convincing myself I was strong enough for both of us. But lying there in a hospital gown, blood still drying on my forehead, I realized strength didn't mean carrying someone who refused to walk beside you. "Yes," I whispered. "My brother. David. Call David." While Patricia dialed, I stared at my phone again. The screen glowed in my palm, Tyler's text still visible like evidence in a trial I hadn't realized was underway. "Can't leave lunch with Charlotte. Call an Uber." 8 years reduced to 23 words. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the morning filling Charlotte's prescriptions for anxiety medication, answering her questions about side effects, smiling politely when she brushed past me in the pharmacy, acting like my existence was just an obstacle between her and my husband. Now here I was lying in a hospital bed because of a college kid's reckless driving, while Tyler played bodyguard at a lunch table, protecting Charlotte from a stalker who only seemed to exist when it was convenient. The pain medication dulled my shoulder, but nothing dulled the truth staring me in the face. Tyler had chosen her, over me, over us, over everything. The curtain rustled. Patricia returned phone in hand. "David's on his way," she said firmly. 2 hours out, but he's coming. Relief washed through me, sharp and sudden, almost painful. My brother, my real emergency contact. I looked at my phone one last time, at the 23 words that had shattered my marriage. My hand shook, but not from the accident this time. It was the tremor of clarity of finally seeing the truth I'd been avoiding for too long. Tyler wasn't my partner. He was just a man who happened to share my last name. And in that moment, with stitches in my forehead and my shoulder bound tight, I knew when David walked through that door, it wouldn't just be to comfort me. It would be to help me end this marriage. Because 23 words had told me everything I needed to know. The Sterling Room wasn't the kind of place you just wandered into. It was polished marble floors, hushed conversations, crystal glasses, and napkins folded so precisely they looked like origami. It was Tyler's kind of place, pretentious, expensive, and full of people who believed presentation mattered more than truth. I pictured it clearly from my hospital bed monitors still beeping behind me. The white tablecloths, the window view of the city, Tyler leaning forward laughing at Charlotte's stories, his phone face down on the table so my existence wouldn't interrupt his afternoon. That's where Officer Janet Morrison and her partner walked in. The restaurant's atmosphere shifted the second the uniforms appeared. Conversations faltered. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Waiters stepped aside as if sensing something important was about to unfold. At the far corner by the window, Tyler looked up mid-sentence. His smile flickered when he saw the officers. Charlotte's manicured hand lingered on his sleeve, confusion flashing across her face. "Mr. Tyler Wilson." Officer Morrison's voice carried across the room, calm but commanding. Tyler blinked. "Yes, can I help you?" His tone was light, almost dismissive, like he was about to explain away a parking ticket. "Your wife, Hannah Wilson, was involved in a serious car accident earlier this evening," Morrison said. "She's at Riverside General. We've been trying to reach you for hours." The entire room went still. Chairs creaked as people leaned closer. Tyler's face cycled through emotions, confusion, irritation, then a flush of embarrassment creeping up his neck. Yes, I saw her text," he stammered. "But Charlotte needed me. She's dealing with a stalker situation." Charlotte's hand dropped from his arm like it had burned her. "Wait, what?" Her voice cut through the silence, sharper than the clink of silverware. "You told me she was fine. You said she was exaggerating." Dozens of eyes turned on him. The Sterling Room wasn't just expensive, it was gossipy. These were people who thrived on stories, and Tyler had just handed them one on a silver platter. "She was injured," Mr. Wilson Morrison said, her words precise, each one a nail in the coffin of his excuses. Dislocated shoulder head trauma, multiple lacerations. Suggesting she take an Uber home from the ER was not an acceptable response. A gasp rippled across the tables. Someone whispered, "Did he really say Uber?" Tyler's ears turned crimson. He fumbled for his phone like he could erase the message by showing it wasn't real. She's dramatic sometimes. "You don't understand our relationship." But the words rang hollow, especially as Charlotte pushed her chair back, her eyes narrowing. "You made me sit here while your wife was in the hospital." "Tyler, what the hell is wrong with you?" The officers didn't flinch. "You need to go to the hospital now," Morrison said firmly. "Your wife asked us to notify you in person. She was concerned you weren't grasping the seriousness of the situation." The irony was perfect, my husband being told by uniformed officers that his wife mattered. The same man who'd shrugged me off for months, who'd made Thursday lunches sacred while our marriage rotted, was now the center of a spectacle he couldn't control. Every eye in that restaurant watched him squirm. Business associates, clients from his father's firm, strangers who'd now forever remember him as the man who left his wife in the ER for a lunch date. Tyler stood abruptly, knocking his water glass onto the white tablecloth. It spread like a stain of truth, unstoppable and messy. He muttered something to the officers, something about heading there right away, but his voice cracked, betraying the panic beneath. Charlotte didn't move. She folded her arms, her disgust plain for everyone to see. "Don't bother calling me again," she said coldly. "If you can abandon your wife, what makes you think you're capable of being there for anyone?" Her words landed harder than the officers. For the first time, Tyler's mask slipped. The charm, the bravado, the easy grin, all of it evaporated under the weight of reality. He looked small, pathetic, even standing in that polished room with water dripping off his sleeve. The officers escorted him out, not in handcuffs but close enough to make it clear he wasn't in control. The door swung shut behind them, leaving a restaurant buzzing with whispers. Unbelievable. 8 years of marriage, and he chose lunch, his poor wife. The story had already taken root, spreading like wildfire among people who dined on gossip as eagerly as they dined on steak. By dessert, Tyler Wilson's betrayal would be the Sterling Room's main course. Back in my hospital bed, I didn't see any of it, but I could imagine it perfectly, the way his face must have crumbled when Charlotte turned on him, the way the room judged him silently, the way Officer Morrison's words echoed louder than any excuse he could offer. And for the first time since the accident, I smiled. Because Tyler had always cared about appearances more than reality. Tonight the two had collided, and reality had won. Hospitals have their own kind of silence, not the peaceful kind you get at home after a long day, but a heavy, sterile hush broken only by the squeak of nurses' shoes, the beep of monitors, and the low murmur of doctors trading clipped instructions. I lay there, shoulder-strapped, head-throbbing, trying to process that my husband of 8 years had just told me to call an Uber instead of coming to the ER. And then the curtain around my bed pulled back. Hannah. His voice cut through everything, steady, familiar grounding. David, my younger brother, still in his real estate showing clothes a crisp blue button-down khakis wrinkled from the drive, his hair damp from rain, his shoes spotted with mud. He must have driven like a madman to get here. The second I saw his face, the tight knot in my chest loosened. He didn't hesitate. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and took my good hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, safe. 2 hours, he said, his jaw clenched. 2 hours I've been on the road worried sick. And the first thing I hear when I get here, that your husband told you to take an Uber home. I shook my head, ashamed, like somehow I needed to defend Tyler even now. David, please, no. Just no. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of finality. He pulled the visitor's chair closer, his free hand never letting go of mine. His eyes, usually full of easy humor, were sharp now, full of anger, and something else resolve. Show me the messages. My hands trembled as I handed over my cracked phone. He scrolled in silence. First disbelief, then anger, and finally that cold, calculating expression I recognized from his business dealings. The look David wore when he was about to close a deal or dismantle an opponent's bluff. 8 years, he muttered, still scrolling. 8 years I've watched him treat you like staff instead of a wife. But this... He shook his head. This is next-level selfishness. He didn't waste another second. He pulled out his own phone, fingers flying across the screen. Martinez owes me a favor. He can change the locks by tomorrow morning. And Morrison. Moving, they specialize in divorce situations. Discreet, fast. They'll have Tyler's things boxed before lunch, David. My protest was weak, shaky. Part of me still clung to the hope that maybe Tyler would walk in, apologize, explain. But David leaned forward, his voice softer now, though no less firm. Hannah, listen to me. He chose another woman's lunch over your life, over your safety, over his vows. That's not a husband. That's just a man who's been using your loyalty as a safety net. The truth stung, but it was undeniable. I'd been filling prescriptions at the pharmacy, working double shifts, cooking his breakfast, keeping the house running while Tyler played hero at Charlotte's weekly Thursday crises. As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the tray beside me. A new message from Tyler. Hannah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was that serious. Sending police was unnecessary and vindictive. David read over my shoulder, his expression hardening. Vindictive. He abandons you at the ER, and when the cops expose him in front of Charlotte, suddenly you're the villain. Another buzz. You're being dramatic. That was the breaking point. My hand shook, but my heart hardened. Dramatic, that word. The same one he'd used a dozen times whenever I asked why Charlotte's emergencies mattered more than our marriage. David didn't wait for me to answer. He typed something on his own phone, then looked at me with that stone-faced calm that had carried him through real estate deals, bad breakups, and the day we buried our father. Tomorrow morning at 8, the locks change. By noon, the movers will have every one of his things packed into boxes. By evening, this house will belong to you again. No Tyler, no Charlotte, no more excuses. Tears burned my eyes, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time since the accident, I felt like someone was standing up for me. Someone who saw my worth, who didn't think I was dramatic, who didn't need to be convinced to choose me. David, my voice cracked. Thank you. He squeezed my hand, his own eyes softer now. You don't thank family for doing what family should. You've carried him for 8 years, Han. Let me carry this part for you. That night, lying in the hospital bed, the beeping monitors no longer felt like reminders of how broken my body was. They felt like a countdown, a clock ticking toward freedom, toward tomorrow. Friday morning dawned gray and wet, the kind of weather that seeps into your bones. My shoulders still throbbed from the accident, but I was determined to be awake, dressed, and sitting on the couch when the knock came. 8 years of marriage couldn't be erased from bed. I needed to see this. At exactly 8:00 a.m., the doorbell rang. Martinez the locksmith stood there with a battered toolbox and the weary face of someone who'd seen too many broken homes. "David's sister," he asked, though he already knew. When I nodded, he gave a curt nod back. "I'll have you secure in about an hour. New deadbolts, new handles, even that back door you probably forgot about. He won't have a key to anything." The drill whined, metal clinked, and with each turn of the screwdriver, the house shifted. What had once been our space was becoming mine. By 9:30, Morrison Moving arrived. 3 people in navy blue shirts filed in, led by a petite woman named Rosa, who carried herself like she could lift the whole house if she had to. "We'll photograph every item, label every box, and treat everything with care," she said firmly. "Doesn't matter whose name is on it. Neutrality is our policy. Professional, efficient. No judgment in her voice, no pity in her eyes. Just a quiet promise that this part, the ugly logistics, would be handled with dignity." They started in the bedroom. I heard the rustle of tape, the soft thud of shoes on hardwood, the slide of hangers along the closet bar. Every sound was a reminder of how much stuff Tyler had accumulated while I worked late nights and extra shifts to pay for it all. Rolex Rosa called out, holding it up for me to confirm, his anniversary gift. I'd worked through flu season, taken overtime, and skipped vacations to buy that watch. He wore it maybe twice. "Golf clubs," one mover said. They'd cost more than I'd spent on car maintenance in 2 years. He called them networking equipment, though no client ever seemed to appear on the scorecard. Baseball in the display case. His. Supposedly valuable, definitely never touched. Each item stung not because of its price, but because of the memory of me trying to earn his approval with it. At 10:30, Mrs. Chen from next door appeared balancing a Tupperware container of soup that smelled like ginger and comfort. She took one look at the movers and nodded. "About time," she said, simply setting the soup on the table. Her words felt like a blessing. By noon, the townhouse no longer looked like a shared home. The walls bore pale rectangles where his framed diplomas had hung. The closet yawned half empty. The bathroom counter finally had space for my things to spread out. Rosa approached me with an inventory sheet. "That's everything boxed. 63 in total. 63. The number landed heavier than I expected. 8 years of marriage reduced to cardboard and tape. "Do you want us to store them if they're not picked up within the deadline?" she asked. "Yes," I said quietly. "Store them." She gave me a nod, efficient, respectful, and turned back to her crew. From the couch, I stared at the wall of boxes stacked by the door. Kitchen items, office supplies, clothes, miscellaneous personal, and then one that made my chest ache, wedding photos. I hadn't asked them to set that aside. Maybe I should have. But Rosa had been right. Neutrality was their policy. Every piece of Tyler's presence belonged to him now, even the memories. David returned from a phone call with his lawyer friend, a crisp set of papers in his hand. "Formal notice," he said, laying it in front of me. "No drama, no accusations. Just facts. Locks, changed belongings, packed 48 hours to collect all communication through me. You'll never have to speak to him again." The pen felt awkward in my sore hand, but signing that document was like discharging a patient who'd overstayed in critical care. Tyler had been taking up space in my life that could finally be freed. When the movers finished and drove away, the house was eerily quiet. For a moment, I almost couldn't breathe. 8 years of noise, arguments, and excuses gone in 22 minutes of packing and hauling. I walked slowly to the stack of boxes, tracing my fingers over the labels. Office supplies, suits, watches, kitchen. My fingers lingered on the one that read wedding photos. 63 boxes, 8 years. Too many and not nearly enough. David came to stand beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "It's done," he said softly. I nodded, tears prickling but not falling. They weren't tears of grief anymore. They were something else. Relief, release. For the first time in years, my home felt like mine. The walls echoed differently now, lighter, freer, as if they'd been holding their breath and could finally exhale. Tyler might have walked out of the Sterling room humiliated, but here in our townhouse his true removal had just taken place. 63 boxes. That was all he amounted to in the end. Saturday afternoon the townhouse felt strangely still. The boxes were stacked neatly by the entryway like silent witnesses, 63 cardboard monuments to a failed marriage. I sat on the couch, my shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages, a mug of Mrs. Chen's divorce soup cooling on the table. David was in the kitchen fussing with sandwiches he claimed I needed to eat. At 2:47, my phone buzzed with the doorbell camera alert, motion detected. I opened the app, and there he was. Tyler. But not the Tyler I remembered. His usually perfect hair stuck up at odd angles, his shirt wrinkled, his tie gone. He looked like someone had drained the life out of him like a mannequin left in the rain. Behind him, a black Mercedes pulled up. Out stepped Eleanor Wilson, his mother. Sunglasses on, despite the overcast sky, her mouth set in a line sharp enough to cut glass. If Tyler looked broken, Eleanor looked determined. "They're here," I whispered. David abandoned the sandwiches and came to stand behind me, one hand resting firmly on my good shoulder. On the camera feed, Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Ring it, Tyler." He hesitated, hand hovering over the bell before letting it drop. "She changed the locks," he muttered. "She won't answer." "Then we use the intercom," Eleanor snapped. "Stand up straight." "You look pathetic." Her finger pressed the button and her voice crackled through the speaker inside my living room. "Hannah, this is Eleanor Wilson. We're here to collect Tyler's belongings as specified in your notice. Please confirm the items are ready. Not, 'How are you?' Not, 'I'm sorry for what happened.' Just business." David pressed the intercom button. "Mrs. Wilson, this is David Hannah's brother. The boxes are in the entryway. The door will unlock remotely. You have 30 minutes to complete removal." There was a pause. Eleanor's voice returned even colder. "Understood." David hit the remote unlock. On the screen, Tyler pushed the door open slowly, like he was entering enemy territory. His eyes landed on the wall of boxes, and for a moment he just froze. 8 years of his life stacked neatly with labels: office supplies, clothes, kitchen, wedding photos. His lips moved, but the camera didn't pick up the words. Eleanor swept past him, heels clicking her eyes, scanning the labels with the efficiency of an auditor. "Start loading," she ordered. Tyler picked up the first box, office supplies, and shuffled it out to the Mercedes. His movements were stiff, mechanical, like a man underwater. Trip after trip, the boxes disappeared into the car. Designer suits, watches, golf clubs. Eleanor supervised from the doorway, occasionally barking reminders to be careful with certain boxes. She never lifted a single one herself. On his third trip, Tyler stopped at the box labeled wedding photos. He stood there a full minute just staring. His shoulders sagged, his hands trembling. "Tyler, we don't have all day," Eleanor snapped. He lifted the box finally, his eyes red. Whether from tears or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. For the first time in years, I saw him stripped of his bravado. No charm, no swagger, just hollow. "Kitchen items expensive," he muttered, when Rose's neat handwriting caught his eye. "Copper pans he'd insisted we needed but never used. A $2,000 espresso machine that made coffee no better than the old one. The mandolin slicer still in its box. All of it reminders of how much he'd demanded, how little he gave." By the 15th trip, his steps dragged. Eleanor's voice cracked across the entryway like a whip. "Tyler, enough dramatics. Get it done. Dramatics." The same word he'd used when I texted from the ER. The same word he'd used to dismiss my accident. Hearing it from his mother's lips made something inside me settle. This wasn't just Tyler. It was generational. Excuses packaged as superiority. Emotions treated as inconveniences. Finally, the last box left the entryway. Tyler lingered, his hand brushing the doorframe, his eyes lifting to the doorbell camera. Our gazes locked across the screen, me inside him outside. For a second, his face crumpled, not into apology, not into regret, just recognition. Like he finally understood what he'd thrown away for Thursday lunches. Eleanor appeared beside him, her sunglasses now perched on her head. "Is that everything?" "Yeah," Tyler murmured. "That's everything." She pressed the intercom one last time. "The items have been collected. Tyler wanted me to tell you he left his house key on the counter last week." Last week, before the accident, before the Uber text. He'd already been pulling away. The information should have hurt, but it didn't. It was just another puzzle piece clicking into place. proof that he'd been preparing his exit long before fate forced mine. The Mercedes pulled away 63 boxes crammed into its trunk and back seat. I watched until it turned the corner and disappeared, taking with it 8 years of my life I would never get back and no longer wanted. David squeezed my shoulder. "It's done." For the first time, I believed him. It didn't take long for word to spread. The Sterling Room had been packed the night the police walked in, and gossip in this town traveled faster than any news outlet ever could. By the following Monday, half of Riverside General's staff had already heard about Tyler Wilson, the husband who abandoned his wife in the ER to sit at lunch with another woman. Nurses whispered about it at the break room coffee pot. A doctor who'd seen me at the award dinner 2 days later raised his eyebrows and muttered, "That was your husband. Damn." Even patients seemed to know. One older woman picking up her prescription leaned across the counter and said, "Good for you, honey. Don't let that man darken your doorstep again." For once, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt seen. Meanwhile, Tyler was busy rewriting the story. A week later, my coworker Melissa texted me from downtown. "You won't believe who's at Murphy's Bar." Murphy's, a dive bar Tyler used to call a place for people with no ambition. Now he was there hunched over whiskey like it was medicine, telling anyone who'd listen that I had overreacted to a fender bender. Melissa sent another text a few minutes later. "He's crying into his drink. Kept saying you were dramatic." Bartender finally cut him off. I sat at my kitchen table staring at those words. It should have made me angry. It should have hurt. Instead, it almost made me laugh. My husband, who once polished his cufflinks before lunch, reduced to crying into cheap whiskey at a bar he used to sneer at. And Charlotte, she'd vanished. Melissa's cousin, who worked at Charlotte's firm, reported she'd been posting beach photos from Cabo. Sunset cocktails, ocean views, hashtags about self-care. The same woman whose weekly crises had stolen my husband's time and attention for months had disappeared the moment she could actually have him. There was something almost poetic about it. Tyler had risked and lost his marriage, his dignity, and eventually his reputation for a woman who was sipping margaritas on a beach while he drowned himself in whiskey. But the damage didn't stop at bars and gossip. 2 weeks after the accident, Tyler's father walked into the pharmacy. Richard Wilson, usually immaculate in a tailored suit, but that day he looked older, his tie-crooked exhaustion in his eyes. "Hannah," he said awkwardly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I work here, Mr. Wilson," I said evenly, pulling up his prescription. He cleared his throat. "Tyler's been struggling, lost 3 major clients already, shows up late, reports full of errors. Sometimes he doesn't show up at all." He paused. "He calls in sick every Thursday now, says he can't face the day." Every Thursday. The same day he used to call sacred. The day he used to leave me waiting at home while Charlotte's crises took precedence. Now Thursday was his undoing. He drives past the intersection. "Sometimes," Richard added, lowering his voice, "the one where you had the accident. His mother thinks he's punishing himself. Maybe he was. Or maybe he was just looking for a way to turn his guilt into another performance. Either way, it wasn't my burden anymore." Richard studied my face, searching for bitterness. I gave him none. Just professional neutrality. "Your prescription is ready," I said, sliding the bag across the counter. As he left, I realized something that startled me with its clarity. Tyler's collapse wasn't my responsibility. For years, I'd carried his weight, smoothed his edges, made excuses for his absences. Now, watching from a distance, I saw the truth. Without me, his life was unraveling. And I didn't feel sorry, not even a little, because this was karma. Not the dramatic, fiery kind, not the kind that comes in a courtroom or with shouting matches, but the slow, grinding kind. The kind where someone finally has to live inside the world they created. Tyler had chosen lunches over love, excuses over truth, Charlotte over me. And now he had cheap whiskey instead of wine tastings, missed clients instead of praise, silence from Charlotte instead of her texts, gossip instead of admiration. The golden boy was tarnishing, and for once it wasn't my job to polish him back up. I sat back on my couch that evening, a blanket over my legs. The house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Tyler's world was crumbling, but mine was healing. Slowly, steadily, piece by piece. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel like I was the one falling apart. 2 months after the accident, I thought the silence had finally settled. The locks were changed, the boxes gone, and Tyler's number filtered straight into digital oblivion. My days had a rhythm again, pharmacy shifts, book club evenings, spent with mismatched plates and laughter instead of tension. Then one morning an email slipped past my filters. The subject line read, "Please read. I finally understand." It was from a new address. He'd created a fresh inbox just to reach me. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The message sprawled across 3 pages. Tyler poured out every excuse he could gather. Stress at work had clouded his judgment. Charlotte had told him she was suicidal that day, though she was currently posting sunset selfies from Cabo. He claimed he froze in crisis situations because of undiagnosed anxiety. He said therapy was helping, but the line that stuck with me was almost comical in its detail. "I was eating overpriced salmon while you were fighting for your life. I see how wrong I was." Salmon. That's what he remembered. Not the vows, not the hospital, not the police showing up at his lunch. The salmon. At the end, he begged, "Doesn't 8 years deserve a second chance? We could try counseling." I closed the email without responding and added his new address to my filter. 8 years wasn't a free pass. 8 years was just 8 years. Time spent, nothing more. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, David called me. His voice tinged with irritation and barely suppressed amusement. "You're not going to believe what just happened," he said. I braced myself. What now? Tyler showed up at my office. In the parking lot. At 7 in the morning. Looked like he'd slept in his car. Said he just needed to talk to you. He was begging me to set up a meeting, shouting about how he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. I groaned, pressing my hand to my forehead. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." David sighed. Security had to escort him out. Half the office watched through the windows. My secretary filmed the whole thing. He kept repeating, "She's my wife, I love her," like a broken record. "But here's the thing, Hannah." He never said it when it mattered. Not once. The words lodged in my chest. Tyler had never said them when I was bleeding in the ER. He hadn't said them when officers stood at his table. He hadn't said them when I signed the notice ending our life together. He only said them now when he had nothing left to lose. That evening, another attempt slipped through, this time a handwritten letter left at the pharmacy. He must have dropped it off while I was on lunch. The handwriting was shaky, the words rambling. He admitted he was haunted by driving past the intersection where the accident happened, said he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't function without me. But between the lines, the same old patterns showed through blame-shifting self-pity and expectation that I'd swoop in to fix him. I folded the letter, dropped it in the shred bin, and went back to counting pills. Tyler's desperation only made me surer. Because this wasn't love. It wasn't even remorse. It was fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of being alone. Fear of finally facing the mess he'd made without me to clean it up. The next week I heard from Melissa again. "Guess who tried to ambush me at Murphy's?" she texted. Apparently Tyler was making the bar rounds now, telling strangers that his wife had left him for no reason. When Melissa confronted him, he slurred that I was vindictive and overdramatic. Same script, new audience. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Each attempt email parking lot, letter bar story felt less like a grand gesture and more like a bad rerun. The man who once worried about appearances was now reduced to public outbursts filmed by strangers and whispered about in grocery store aisles. And me, I felt lighter, stronger. Every pathetic comeback from Tyler was another reminder that I had chosen correctly, that leaving wasn't dramatic, it was survival. Late one night, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a mystery novel, I realized something that made me laugh out loud. For years, I had been afraid of what life without Tyler would look like. But now, watching him stumble through one desperate act after another, I finally saw the truth. Life without Tyler wasn't scary. It was freedom. 6 months had passed since the accident, and the house no longer felt haunted. The walls that once echoed with Tyler's absence now hummed with something new, laughter, warmth, and the kind of noise that comes from people who actually want to be together. That night I hosted a dinner party. Nothing fancy, nothing polished, just a spread of food on mismatched plates I'd found at thrift stores, blue with flowers, yellow with geometric shapes, plain white chipped on the edge. Tyler would have been mortified. Me, I found them perfect. Colleagues from the pharmacy filled the living room. Mrs. Chen arrived with her divorce soup again, insisting everyone try it. My book club friends leaned against the counter, wine glasses in hand, debating which mystery author was most underrated. David manned the kitchen, somehow flipping quesadillas while keeping everyone laughing with his real estate horror stories. The room buzzed with life, and for once I wasn't shrinking in the background, apologizing for simplicity or rushing to refill someone's glass before they noticed. I was present, smiling, whole. At one point, Nurse Patricia, the same woman who had stood at my ER bedside months earlier, raised her glass. To Hannah, she said, "For reminding us that scars don't mean broken. They mean you survived." The room erupted in cheers, and my throat tightened with gratitude. Later, when the guests had gone and the dishes were stacked in uneven towers by the sink, I stood in the quiet glow of string lights David had hung in the backyard. For the first time in years, I felt like this was my home, not a stage for Tyler's image, not a pit stop between his Thursday lunches, just mine. The next morning, I had my final follow-up with Dr. Webb at Riverside General. He rotated my shoulder gently, nodding in approval. "Perfect recovery," he said. His eyes flicked to the faint silver lines on my forehead. "The scars will fade soon, barely noticeable in a few months." "They don't bother me," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. Those scars weren't disfigurements, they were proof. Proof that I'd survived, proof that I'd rebuilt, proof that I wasn't the same woman who once waited by the door for Tyler to come home. Dr. Webb smiled. "Sometimes scars are the most honest part of us." On the drive home, I took a detour. For months, I'd avoided the intersection at 5th and Madison, the place where my car had crumpled like paper, where metal had bent around my body, where everything I thought I knew about my marriage had shattered. The light turned red, and I stopped. The intersection looked ordinary now, cars rolling through, people crossing with coffee cups, the world oblivious to the history buried in that asphalt. No skid marks, no broken glass, just pavement. I sat there breathing steady and realized the truth that night hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed me. Tyler thought I was dramatic. His mother thought I was disposable. Charlotte thought I was a nuisance. But standing, or rather sitting at that light, I knew the only opinion that mattered was mine, and mine was clear. I had survived. I had healed. I was free. The light turned green. A car behind me honked gently, and I smiled as I pressed the gas. Not rushed, not anxious, just moving forward. Back at home, I curled up on my couch with a blanket and a paperback mystery novel, the kind Tyler once dismissed as books for people who don't really read. I lost myself in Chapter 12, sipping tea, the window open to the sounds of kids playing down the street, and Mrs. Chen humming in her garden. For the first time in years, Thursday afternoon didn't mean panic or suspicion. It didn't mean checking my phone to see if Charlotte's crisis had stolen Tyler again. It didn't mean holding my breath until he walked through the door. It meant peace. And peace, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. The Thursday sun filtered through the curtains, warm and steady, painting golden stripes across my living room floor. 6 months ago, I would have been rushing, checking my phone, preparing Tyler's dinner, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock, praying Charlotte wouldn't keep him too late at lunch. But this Thursday, it was quiet. My phone sat face up on the coffee table, not hidden or flipped over in fear of what message might come through. I didn't feel that anxious pull in my chest, the one that used to tighten whenever Tyler was busy. I felt free. The accident had left scars, sure. A thin silver line across my forehead, a shoulder that sometimes ached when the weather changed. But the deeper wounds, the ones no one could see, were finally closing. I thought about Tyler sometimes, like a character in an old movie I once watched and no longer cared to finish. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine, his job at his father's firm collapsing, Charlotte disappearing to Cabo, his reputation unraveling. He had called my accident dramatic, but now he was the one telling anyone who would listen that he had been betrayed. The irony was almost poetic. But here's the truth. I'd come to accept his downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was smaller, quieter, and infinitely stronger. It was the peace of sitting on my own couch with a book I loved. It was laughing with friends over mismatched plates. It was brewing tea in a $20 kettle instead of polishing a $2,000 espresso machine he never used. For 8 years I had measured my worth by his approval, his needs, his endless crises. The accident, brutal as it was, stripped all of that away. It forced me to face the truth. Love isn't proven by loyalty to someone who doesn't show up for you. Love is proven by presence, by being there when it matters, by keeping promises, even small ones. Tyler failed that test. David, Mrs. Chen, Patricia, my co-workers even. Officer Morrison, they passed it without hesitation. That was the difference. That was family. One evening, I found myself walking past the church where David and I used to go as kids. The doors were open, candles flickering inside. I slipped into a pew at the back, not to pray exactly, but to think. The pastor's voice echoed through my memory. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not dishonor others. It always protects, always trusts, always perseveres. For years, I'd twisted myself trying to make my marriage fit those words. But real love wasn't supposed to feel like an endurance test. It wasn't supposed to demand sacrifice without support. Real love, I realized, was what I'd seen in David driving 2 hours without hesitation, in Mrs. Chen bringing soup when she could have just looked away, in friends who showed up to fill my home with laughter. That's what love looked like. That's what I deserved. I didn't forgive Tyler in the way movies make forgiveness look neat, dramatic, tied with a bow. No, I forgave him by letting go, by refusing to let his betrayal write the rest of my story, by refusing to carry his mistakes as my burden. The accident had broken bones. His choices had broken trust. But both had healed, and healing, I realized, is the greatest form of revenge, because peace, the kind he could never give me, the kind he couldn't buy with gifts or excuses, was mine now. I leaned back on my couch, my book open in my lap, the window open to the sound of kids playing down the street. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't wondering. I wasn't wishing. I was living. And that, more than public humiliation, more than packed boxes, more than police, at a fancy restaurant, that was what would haunt him most. Because while he was still chasing shadows, I was already bathed in sunlight. The house was quiet that evening, but it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of peace. For the first time in years, I could hear the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the wooden floor under my own footsteps, the steady rhythm of my breathing. I realized that this quiet was not loneliness. It was freedom. Months had passed since the accident and the chaos that followed. My scars had faded, both the ones on my forehead and the ones carved deeper inside. My shoulder was strong again, though every once in a while on cold mornings, it still reminded me of what had happened. But instead of bitterness, I felt gratitude. Because that crash, that shattering moment, had forced me to face truths I had been avoiding for far too long. I no longer asked myself why Tyler chose Charlotte, or why he couldn't be the husband I deserved. I stopped rehearsing the arguments I would never have with him. Those endless what-ifs had no power over me anymore. I had let them go. And in letting go, I discovered something unexpected: forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness people imagine from romantic movies where you take someone back and pretend nothing happened. My forgiveness was different. It was not for Tyler, it was for myself. Forgiving him didn't mean excusing what he had done. It meant releasing the hold his betrayal had on my heart. It meant choosing not to let anger be the shadow that followed me every day. There is a verse from the Bible that says, "Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." For years I tried to bend my marriage to fit that verse. But real love doesn't demand that you carry someone else's selfishness like a cross. Real love is shown in presence, in showing up when it matters. And when Tyler failed that test, I finally understood that my vows had value, even if his didn't. It took me time, but I chose not to let resentment define me. Because here's the truth: holding on to bitterness only chains you to the past. Letting go, even without reconciliation, is the only path to real freedom. As the months rolled by, I began to notice small joys I had ignored before. Dinner with friends on mismatched thrift store plates. Mrs. Chen humming in her garden as I waved from my porch. My brother David cracking jokes while cooking pasta in my kitchen. These were not grand gestures, but they were real. They were love showing up in simple, steady ways. And Tyler. His downfall became its own story. He lost clients. He lost Charlotte. He lost the image he had built so carefully. Some said it was karma. Some said it was justice. But I no longer cared. Because the real revenge was not his suffering. The real revenge was my peace. That is the lesson I want to leave with you. Revenge does not always have to be dramatic or cruel. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is choosing happiness when someone expected you to be broken. Sometimes the best justice is refusing to let betrayal poison your future. As one old Western proverb says, peace is the best revenge. My life now is simple, but it is mine. I read books Tyler once mocked. I drink tea from a chipped mug that makes me smile. I laugh freely in my own home without worrying about someone else's mood. And in these small, ordinary moments, I have found more joy than in all those years of trying to earn his approval. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is strength. Forgiveness is saying, you don't get to control me anymore. Forgiveness is freedom. And maybe that's why stories like this resonate so deeply with people around the world. Because we all carry scars, some visible, some hidden. We all know what it feels like to be overlooked, betrayed, or left behind. But we also know the power of rising again. This is why we call them true revenge stories, not because they glorify destruction, but because they show that the sweetest revenge is living well after the storm has passed. So I ask you, dear listeners, what part of this journey spoke to you the most? Was it the moment the police walked into the Sterling room exposing Tyler in front of everyone? Was it when my brother David showed me what true family looks like? Or was it this ending quiet, steady, filled with the strength of forgiveness and peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're there, let me know where in the world you're watching from. It always amazes me to see how these stories connect people from Maine to Manila, from Lagos to London, from Perth to Portland. If Hannah's journey touched you, if you believe that peace and forgiveness are stronger than betrayal, then hit that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true revenge stories with powerful lessons and unforgettable twists, because in the end, revenge is not about destroying someone else. It's about reclaiming yourself. And sometimes the quiet smile of a woman finally at peace is louder than any storm her betrayer could ever cause.